All right, thank you very much. Welcome. I hereby call this meeting of the Orangetown Town Board to order. Would the town clerk please call the roll?
Councilman Troy,
Present.
Councilman Divany,
Here.
Councilman Valentine,
Here.
Councilman Batari, and Supervisor Day.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, before we get started, there's a couple of announcements. We have upcoming public hearings at the April 24th regular town board meeting. First, we're going to have a petition for zone change for Town Plaza 2 tax map. It's switching over one zone to another and a portion of the parcel. And then another proposed amendment on April 24th for 70 Hickory Hill Road. That will be on the 24th of April as well. I'm also going to announce that right now on the agenda we had the public hearing for the proposed law amending town code for devices and rights of ways, but we're going to adjourn that due to substantive changes to the law that were based on comment from O&R. So we're going, just anyone who's here to comment on that, we're going to move to adjourn it. The comment won't be taken today. We'll adjourn to a future meeting, and that will be scheduled either on the 24th or a subsequent meeting after that. It's just part of the process we have to follow. Should we, do we want to, I mean, we probably should.
Don't we gotta go 30 days out?
How many days out do we have to go on this?
Thought it was 30 days.
30.
30, so it's got to be at least.
I'm sorry, what, 30, right?
30 from today.
Yeah.
So we have to do, May 15th is a town board meeting.
No, if we've already noticed it, so if you want to just continue to the next, to whatever date you want, we just have to continue it tonight.
Okay, but there were
Yes.
changes, so we
Yeah.
noticed it already.
Yeah, well, then we'll renotice it, that's true.
We're
I thought it
renoticing
had been renoticed for tonight, it wasn't?
No, it wasn't
Okay,
renoticed in
then
time
we have
for
to
tonight.
renotice it all over.
Okay, so then May 15th will
30.
be the next available town board meeting to do it at. All right, so we haven't made the motion to do it, but we're going to adjourn it to May 15th, and we won't be taking the comment tonight on it because of those changes. It's just the way the legal process works for this, and I'm sorry for that change. One more announcement. We also have, on May 15th, we'll be having a public hearing for a Galway Bay proposed amendment to change to a PAC district. And then one housekeeping announcement. On April 22nd, from 8:30 to 11 a.m., the Tappan Fire Department is hosting a community cleanup. That will be at the firehouse at 123 Washington Street. Again, that's April 22nd from 8:30 to 11. Everyone is welcome. Just wear something you don't mind picking up garbage in, and it'll be good to go. All right, so we're going to move on. We're going to be swearing in some police officers today. It's a great evening for Orangetown. So I need a motion to amend the agenda.
I'll make a motion to amend the agenda to appoint the police officers right now.
Okay, from Councilman Divany. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilman Valentine, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so first we're going to vote on the actual appointments, and then we're going to have the swearing-in ceremonies one by one. So we'll vote all of them in a row, and then we'll move to the ceremony. So you have a resolution to appoint Paul Valentine as a police officer effective April 11th.
Moved.
Councilman Batari, seconded by Councilman Troy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
I'm gonna abstain.
that's fair. Do I have a motion to appoint Mark Myers, police officer effective April 11th?
I'll make a motion.
Councilman Valentine, second. Councilman Troy, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion to appoint Luke Graney, police officer, effective April 11th.
Moved.
Councilman Divany, second. Councilman Batari, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion to appoint James Scaccia, police officer, effective April 11th.
I'll make a motion.
Councilman Troy, second by Councilman Valentine, all in favor?
Aye.
And motion to appoint Orlando Corchado, police officer, April 16th, effective date for him.
Moved.
Councilman Divany, second. Councilman Troy, all in favor?
Aye.
And motion to appoint Anthony Ramone, effective April 16th, as police officer. Councilman Batari, second. Councilman Troy, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, great. So I'm going to turn it over to Captain Butterworth, who's going to be leading the ceremonies today.
Thank you, Mr. Day, Councilman, Mrs. Madigan, Mr. Negrino. I just want to give you a brief background on the 6 officers as I call them up. I welcome you to bring as many of your family members as you want to come up and take pictures when they get sworn in with Mrs. Madigan. It's a special night for the town. These are all people from our community. They came here, they're enthused. You know, you're here to do honorable deeds. You're here to do, you know, good things for this community. You've done it leading up to this, and we're going to continue. I'm excited for you guys, and I'm excited for the community. The first officer, he's in the Rockland County Police Academy right now, is Paul Valentine. He is a Tappan Zee High School graduate, class of 2002. SUNY Binghamton, class of 2006. Pace University Law School, class of 2009. And he was working in the law practice prior to entering the police academy in February. Paul.
Dennis with the sassy glasses. I like the shades.
And the Constitution of the State of New York. And I will faithfully discharge the duties of police officer in the town of Orangetown to the best of my ability. So help me God.
This guy.
Mark Myers is originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I'm sure if we were there, that wouldn't be the right way to say it, but we'll be okay. He moved to Rockland in 2012, actually moved to Orangetown. He lived in Piermont briefly, and now he has settled in Pearl River. He worked for Rockland Psychiatric Center Safety, and he was in the Rockland County Jail as a corrections officer prior to going into the police academy in February. Mark?
I, Mark Myers, do solemnly swear that I will uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. I will uphold the Constitution of the State of New York. And I will faithfully discharge the duties of police officer in the town of Orangetown to the best of my ability. So help me God.
Luke Rainey moved to Orangetown in 2000. He came from Queens. His dad's a captain in FDNY. He's a Tappan Zee High School graduate, class of 2010, a SUNY Cortland, class of 2014. Some from this side of town might know him. He was a lifeguard at Rockland Country Club, and prior to going to the Rockland County Police Academy, he was a social studies teacher in New York City at the time of that hire.
I, Lou Rainey, do solemnly swear that I will uphold the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of the State of New York, and I will faithfully discharge the duties of police officer for the town of Orangetown to the best of my ability, so help me God.
James Garcia, he was born and raised in Tappan, and when you look at him, you won't think it was that long ago. But he actually has been here a long time. His dad's a long-time Town Highway Department employee. He's a Tappan Zee High School graduate, class of 2012, SUNY Rockland class of 2014, and was a personal trainer at Retro Fitness at the time that he was hired. He's been in the police academy since February. Orlando Corchado II was born in Brooklyn. He graduated high school in New Mexico. He's a United States Naval Academy at Annapolis, class of 2000, helicopter pilot in the United States Marine Corps. He was honorably discharged from the Marine Corps as a major after 14 years, 9 of them being active service. New York City police officer from 2012 to the present with a brief one-year stint as a New York City fireman in between there, and he went back to the police department. He's currently a New York City police officer until next week. Orlando? Anthony Ramone, he grew up in Pearl River. His stepfather is a retired Orangetown officer, James Kelly. He's here somewhere. He's a Pearl River High School class of 2008, SUNY Albany class of 2012.
Great Danes.
He was a lifeguard at Norristown Swim Club. We like lifeguards.
Same here.
And he is currently a New York City police officer from 2013 till now, until next week. Anthony?
Yeah.
Once again, I'd like to thank the town board. This is a special night for the community. And I was sitting here thinking that if they do their 32-year career, it'll be 2050. Wow. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Captain Butterworth, and thank you to all the new officers. I'm gonna move to a 5-minute recess. Have a second? Councilman Valentine, all in favor? All right, we're just gonna let everyone mingle a bit. We'll be back in 5 minutes. All right. Everyone good? Do we have to move back out of recess, or we just?
Yes.
All right, do I have a motion to return?
I'll make a motion to come back out of recess.
All right, Councilman Valentine, second. Councilman Divney, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Public comment?
All right, so we are going to go, since it's now 8 o'clock, we're going to go straight into our first public hearing on the proposed daycare mixed use. Is there a motion to open the public hearing? Councilman Troy, second. Councilman Valentine, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so first we have no one who signed in, so we're going to have the folks who are the applicants make a brief commentary and presentation, and then we'll take anyone who's interested in commenting who didn't sign in following that. Go ahead.
Noelle Wolfson, Hockerman, Tortorella, and Weckstein. We are counsel for the applicants. And this is an application for amendments to a mixed-use expansion special use permit for a property commonly known as the Shops at Orangeburg Commons. It's the small parcel back here at the back of Orangeburg Commons. And the amendment is to replace the currently approved about 18,000 square foot mixed-use restaurant retail building with a child daycare center. The daycare center would be 10,000 square feet in the building, and then it would have an adjacent 5,000 square foot playground, generally in the footprint of the already approved mixed-use building. We're also seeking an amendment to the special use permit for the mixed-use development for Orangeburg Commons. There are no real changes proposed for the Orangeburg Commons property. There are a few minor adjustments to the parking right along the shared boundary. And because the special use expansion is a part of the mixed-use development, both permits need to be updated at the same time if there's an amendment to the special use, to the mixed-use expansion portion of it. We're happy to go through the some specifics of the proposal. And I know this has been before the board multiple times, so I don't know if you would like a full presentation or if you just like, if you have questions, about the
I think
proposal.
we should open public comment first and see what.
Yep. I'll open
Yeah.
public comment.
I think we just did the motion to open it,
Yeah.
so we
Yeah.
can take the public comment first, yeah. So we'll just take public comment and then we'll come back if we have any questions.
So no one's-
So is there anyone here who's interested in making a comment who did not sign in? Yes.
So my name is Andrew Wiley. So with regards to the application, I see it's right abutting the railroad tracks. And I know I spoke to a few people prior to this. And my concern is that, one, you're asking for another special permit or multiple special permits. When this was envisioned, there was a vision that the previous town board and some of the town board members were here had on this. At that time, this wasn't one of the uses that was looked at. So I have serious concerns with regards to the safety. There's a hotel right next to it. I know when I made a hotel application, I was made out to be like transient population. You got children there and you quote unquote have a transient population no matter what their situation is. Very hard to deal with if there are any potential sex offenders or anyone who's gonna be staying there. I don't know what complications they're gonna have with regards to that, if they're a long-term stay type situation. In addition to that, you got real health and safety issues. Those trains bring all types of petrochemicals and all types of chemicals. If there's a derailment, that's gonna be a really tragedy, because those children are really gonna have to do it. And I forgot the age group, you're talking infants even. I think the better application would be for that to be moved forward on the front end of the property, on one of the other pads. I don't see this as a good use in that location. I think that you could put like storage or some other use there, depending on whether or not the board agrees with that. But putting it and citing in that location, I think there's some serious concerns that should be looked at before voting on. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is anyone else here to comment on the daycare special use permit? Okay, in the back, yes.
Good evening, Neil Lenedy. I live on Kevin Drive.
Sir, could you say your name again for the record?
Cornelius Lenedy.
Okay, thank you.
With the change of this, is it changing the footprint of what was the stores that were approved there?
Smaller.
Because as the assistant chief of the fire department, I don't think we received anything on the change of this. You know, I know we had, when it first was being approved, we brought our ladder truck down there, made sure we could get in and out, and I don't remember seeing anything on this, on the proposed change to the structure, the layout. And then my other question is, with the LLCs, is there a person's name and an address, not a PO box, assigned to these LLCs, so that we don't end up like our neighbors to the northwest?
Do you mean for the specific application?
To any LLC that's on this application, because the notice we got mailed to our houses, it was very vague. There's 6 LLCs on there, and never heard of any of them.
You could continue your comment and then we'll address, and we'll have the applicant address when you're wrapped up. Great,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay. Is anyone else interested in commenting on the proposed mixed-use daycare public hearing? Yes.
Good evening Supervisor Christine, Town Board members. My name is Esther Ann Baylor, and I live at Kathy Lucan Independent Living Center in Spark Hill. Tonight I'm here to address all of you regarding the Orangeburg Commons site, the daycare center. I'm really, really opposed to it. It's right near the CSX trains that carry all kinds of toxic fumes. I don't believe that putting children in that kind of spot, it just doesn't belong there. Should go on the Rockland site grounds where there's extra land. So I hope you'll all vote no on this proposal. Thank you. Have a great night.
Great, thank you. All right, anyone else who's interested in making comment during this particular public hearing on the mixed-use application? Okay. So I'm going to ask if the applicant could just step back up again, because there were a couple specific questions that were asked. First, Mr. Wiley had asked about considering another pad location on the site. If you could maybe get into whether that's possible and why not, if not, perhaps?
Sure. We have the Learning Experience Daycare Center. They're our tenant for this site. We have a signed lease for this property with that tenant, and they selected this property. This is the property that is of interest to them. And that's why this location was selected. You know, we've been through the safety discussion about the daycare center in this location. We had an extensive discussion about that during the rezoning, the zoning text amendment portion of this application. There are other daycare centers and preschools locally in similar proximity to the CSX tracks. You know, various uses. There are residential uses right here in proximity to the CSX tracks, and we just don't think the safety concern. We think we can manage the safety concern with the operator. Mr. Jarmel is here from Jarmel Keisel Architects. He's explained the safety measures that the Learning Experience puts forward for their centers, and he's happy to explain that again if you'd like. But we feel that this site is a good location for the daycare center.
The next question was, has
Yeah,
there been
can
a
I-
footprint? I'm
may
sorry,
I?
go ahead, Jerry.
You said that the person wanted the site. Was he offered the other site, or it was not offered any other site on the property?
They actually came to us to
They
request
they
the
came and
site.
they picked that site out of your property?
Correct.
And were they offered any other site, or
Well, that's the site that they were looking for, so.
that's what they were looking for?
Correct.
That's interesting. Okay, thank you.
There is no other site for this location. This is the proposed
Could you
location
explain
for the
that?
daycare
There's no other
center.
site for this. Could you just explain what that means? I mean, are there other vacant pads? I guess the question that was asked is, if they came in and asked specifically for that pad, fine. I mean, they're the, but are there hypothetically other spots, theoretically? They may not want them, but just to be clear.
Sure. This is Al Rossi from RD Management. He's a
Sure.
representative of the owner.
Those who are familiar with the Orangeburg Commons project that's been here before, the site consists of the Stop and Shop, which is constructed, the Extended Stay Hotel, which is constructed. There is a second hotel pad site, and in the front there is a 3,000 square foot drive-through bank that was approved by this board and the planning board over the years, and there's a 5,000 square foot sit-down restaurant pad. The Learning Center requires 10,000 square feet plus a 5,000 square foot playground for 15,000 square feet. With regard to the question that was raised by the person from the fire department, it's basically taking a previously approved 18,000 square foot retail building that was approved by this board in a special permit application 2 years ago, and the planning board, which we have an approved site plan, and we're shrinking that building in its current location from 18,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet. So the building configuration is smaller, but the location does not change, and the remaining area that we're eliminating from a building structure is basically the playground. And the fire department approved this previously, and there's no change to the points of ingress, egress, or the ability of a fire truck to get around and navigate behind the building.
Okay. Great, I think,
I would just add about the fire department is that if the special permit were approved, our next stop will be to the planning board for site plan approval, where this site will get a more in-depth review.
right, and that's fair, just to be, we're not approving the actual site plan here tonight, we're approving the permit to do it, and then the all that stuff comes from other boards, so that level of thing is not really what we're
That's
gonna end up
correct.
getting into, yeah.
Correct.
Does anyone else have any questions for the applicant? No, I thought so, okay. All right, so if, we can either continue or close the public comment on that. I know that we've been through this item in another form already, so, it's kind of a choice. Do you guys want to close comment or?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion on that?
I'll make a motion to close public comment.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? All right, great. And then we can move to approve or deny, or we can not vote, but we just close comments, so we probably would. Is there a motion on the actual question to approve or deny the application? Yes. I'm going to get to that, but generally speaking, that's fair. Normally, I don't want to call it, but the LLC law that was brought up in the previous comment applies to residential landlord owners of buildings. We're talking about companies that are be renting space in another building. It's not the same law. So an LLC is just a structure like a corporation. In this case, the LLCs involved that own the property. We have individuals that we know that are already registered with the town and everything like that. If a company moves in and is a corporation, LLC, or an individual, that's a tenant in a commercial property. The law for residential landlords is not the same law that you're referencing that you got a mailer on. That's for landlords. So if, say, an LLC owned a multifamily home, that LLC has to have a responsible party on site named as the landlord. If an LLC moves in as a daycare operator, they're a company operating a daycare. They're not responsible for the maintenance of the site in the same way the property owner is. So that's the distinction there, if that clarifies it. Okay, so you have a motion on the actual
Chris,
question?
just,
Yeah.
there's also the LLC, the entity disclosure law.
Yes,
If there's a land use application, the
Right.
entities will have, there's a form that they have to fill out, which identifies the individuals who are part of the LLCs or corporations under particular circumstances. So there is an entity disclosure law that will apply when they go for,
Yeah,
well,
through
applies
that
now,
process.
and presumably they have filled that out for this application
Right.
that the building department has, and it will also apply when they come for planning board.
right. So it's confusing because there's LLCs in both cases, but they're two different sets of laws, basically. Okay. So item 10, on the actual question related to the special permit, do we have a motion on to either approve or deny?
I'll move it.
Councilman Divney to approve?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second? Councilman Troy, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay. All right, moving on.
Thank you.
So now we're going to, the next one is granting the amendment of special permits. Is this related to the same one?
That's the same
Oh, that's the next.
resolution.
No, we just did.
No, that one is the one that was already postponed, number 12.
We just did 10.
I'm sorry, 11 was the one to grant the special permit.
11, yeah, right.
So we did
That's
11.
what you voted on.
We just did 11, yeah.
We did the public comment, and then we did 11.
Yeah, we did public comment 11, and then this is long content of the law. Okay, so now we're on to our next public hearing, which we are going to, so I'm going to head and move, this is the devices and right-of-ways public hearing, which we're going to have to adjourn, so I move that we adjourn this public hearing to the regular town board meeting of May 15th. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilman Divney, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
At 8 o'clock?
At a, we had one, we don't have anything scheduled for May 15th yet, right?
I thought the Galway one.
Galway is at 8:05, so we'll do 8:30? 8:15?
All right.
8:15, yeah. After, yeah. All right, so moving on to the next one. There's a lot of more paper here. And again, the reason we're doing that is because of the required changes that we had to make, or the changes we had to make based on feedback from O&R required us to renotice it. We have to put another 30 days in per New York State law in order for it to be valid.
All right.
All right, moving on to the performance standards. So,
Which number is it?
this is number 14 on your
If I
agenda.
could Just point out, it's a
That's the same
continuation of a public hearing, you're not, so there's no need to move to open the public hearing, it's already open. So I'm just correcting,
Okay,
so number 14, it should read continuation of public hearing, not
okay.
resolution to open.
So we're just going to start the public hearing as
Yeah,
continuing
you
it.
don't need to- you
It's
don't
already
even
there.
need to make a motion.
It exists, gotcha.
But I would reference it on the record.
Okay, so now we're on the point where we are at the performance standards public hearing, and we have at least one person signed in for public comment on that. But first, we're going to have, do you have anything you want to add
Sure.
first, Dennis?
Most of you have seen the emails that have been going back and forth in the past couple of weeks between myself and our outside expert attorneys, Christine Fazio, and Karen Mira. They have not completed their review yet, or they have just today, and I had a conversation with them, and they're going to provide a memo to the town board. It will be a confidential attorney-client privileged memo, with responding firstly to Sive, Paget, and Reisel. I'm not sure exactly how that law firm pronounces their names, but John Patrick Curran from that firm submitted comments, objections, some suggestions and recommendations and objections to the proposed amendments to the performance standards back on February 6th, as you may remember. That was provided to our outside consulting attorneys that I just mentioned. It was also provided to our technical engineer, environmental consultant. I'm not sure if he's an engineer, Sander Bonville. I don't know what happened with Mr. Bonville. I made it clear within the past few days that we would invite his review of the February 6, 2018 letter from Aloof Plastics attorneys, but we haven't received anything from him. I'm not sure what communication failure there was, but I did ask him to do that on February 6th, right here in this meeting room.
I'd like to know what
But the attorneys are going to get us a memo by the end of this week. So we really can't,
vote on this tonight.
No, we can't vote
certainly
tonight.
not vote
No,
on it.
certainly not.
What it comes down to is there have been no changes since February 6th. So what's in front of you now is what was in front of you on February 6th.
Okay,
So,
so it's
Chris,
not changed up to today yet.
Right, I'd make a recommendation that we keep the public comment open.
Yeah.
If someone would like to speak on it today, we'll listen to
Yeah.
it, and we'll continue it until
Absolutely.
we find out what comes back.
That's, I think that's reasonable. Nothing's changed, so it's still the same law we're talking about. It makes sense to continue to take the comment, but certainly not to act yet.
All right.
All right, so we're on the public comment section. We have one person who's signed in. That's Allison Sullivan.
Good evening. Allison Sullivan, Blauvelt, New York. I'm happy for the strengthening of these codes. We've been advocating for it for a long time. But what I'm going to say tonight is about that, but really about the existing code as well. And I just have a couple questions about that. We've been advocating for the town code to enforce existing town code, to hold Aloof accountable for the odor, which I feel has been proven to come from their facility by Jane Slaving, the building department director, George Swikert from the New York State DEC, and by the hundreds of complaints from residents over the past 2 years and beyond. But still, it is not good enough. We continue to modify and change our procedures and codes and hire more professionals and spend more money to help Aloof figure out how to fix a problem with their odor control that has been happening for years. Please explain to me why the existing inspectors and enforcers cannot do something like this, what I'm about to say, under the current town code. Let's say there is an odor report. The enforcer goes to the person's location to where they reported. They attempt to verify the presence of the air contaminant at that location. The inspector proceeds upwind of the odor location in an attempt to identify the source. The investigator will proceed upwind of the facility and around the entire perimeter of the facility to ensure no other sources are contributing to the odor in question. At that point, the inspector will enter the facility and attempt to identify the specific process or area of the facility from which is emanating the odor. Before the inspector leaves, he or she will tell the facility representative whether or not a violation was verified. If a violation was verified, the inspector will issue the appropriate enforcement action to the facility. My questions also are this. How is the town currently handling the odor complaints when they come in? Is there a verification process under the current town code in order? Because obviously this is going to take a really long time to approve the new town code. So I want to know, what can we do now? Is there a verification system? And if so, how does it work? And what happens when an odor comes in at overnight or at night? In my opinion, I feel if we can't regulate overnight hours, then companies should not run overnight. Going forward, I'm asking the town board to change the time when companies are allowed to operate in this zone, or hire an overnight on-call enforcer who can verify overnight odor complaints. That's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to comment on the performance standards public hearing? No one else signed in, yes. Mr. Wiley.
So I'll make it brief, Andrew Wiley. My concerns are, there is intent in legislation to tighten it. One of the concerns I have, and this is something I've faced personally in the town of Orangetown, is when you make an application, you hire your own engineer, you pay for a consultant engineer, and then you have a town engineer. And what's been going on, and it's a long standard practice that I'd like this town board to look into, is that the engineers, very often for simple applications, are required on some instances 6 different times. I had personally had engineering on a lot in Spark Hill where I had to pay for a consultant to revise probably about 6-7 times and never came to a conclusion. So my concern, whether it's for this application, industrial users or others, is that there be some investigation as to how you can get all the engineers in a room together to agree. They're all qualified, they all can do the job, but when you have 3 different entities and the applicant's paying for all 3 entities, I think that's unfair and unreasonable. And I think that should be addressed in this legislation, and I think it should be addressed in anything that's non-industrial. So that's all I have to say on this for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else who would like to comment on the performance standards as, yes?
Good evening. John Curran for Aloof Plastics. I just had a question. You said you were keeping the public comment open. Is that beyond this evening, or is?
It will continue to the subsequent meeting. Yeah,
Okay.
we're not going to close it out tonight.
Then you've answered my question.
Yeah.
I don't need to say.
Okay. Any other questions before we get back to our town attorney? Okay. We'll move to, Dennis, if you could address perhaps the code questions that Allison was asking about with the current code, about the processes associated with it, if you're able to.
How do we
Maybe the
investigate odor?
not how we do it, because I can address that. That's more of a procedure, operations thing. But the procedures and the reasoning behind like the changes to the code and why we're not maybe able to enforce it in the way that we would like under the current as written language.
Tough question.
I mean, it's a tough question,
Well,
but
yeah,
from the legal
But
perspective,
I'll
if you can, because
summarize
the
it.
operational perspective, again, we
yeah,
could talk about.
It just needs a little more meat on the bones. It needs to be updated. One example.
Like if
is-
we did that, would you be able to win in court based on our current code? And with what Allison was describing is my final question.
The efforts to revise the performance standards is for that very purpose, is to make enforcement clearer, not only to the enforcers, but also to the industrial users. What is expected of them, what are the requirements and obligations, and so that they can comply without having to guess at what compliance entails. The way the performance standards are currently written, there are some provisions that are not crystal clear, without showing all my cards, because we still have to work with the current performance standards. But
Yeah.
I think we're all aware of some of the soft parts, I'll call them, of our current performance standards, and that's what we're attempting to fix. Procedurally, substantively, and that's where Sander Bonville, the technical expert consultant, is aiding us, because the technical standards are outdated, they're ambiguous, so that we're fixing that. And also the legal mechanisms are being clarified and strengthened. That's a general overview.
That's fine.
That's summarizing.
To me, it's enforcement and compliance. Making enforcement easier and making it easier for the industrial users to comply with the code.
Right,
I
and
do
that's
know that there's
important
one set of numbers in there that's just a system that's so outdated. you know, we had trouble referencing it.
And I
if
think
recall.
one industrial user that we're familiar with, their attorney has pointed out that it should be clarified not just to 8-hour enforcement, but it should be clarified to aid the industrial users who wish to comply and want to comply. So that it's not just that for us to aid enforcement, it's to aid the industrial user to gain compliance cooperatively.
That's it.
That's it.
Any other questions? So, thank you, Dennis. I don't think we have any other
I
questions, unless
just
you had
wanted
something else
to-
you want to add about procedure for this.
Oh, when do you want to
When should we continue it till, I guess?
continue? to-
Yeah, well, we're getting the memo by the end of this week from our expert consulting attorneys. And depending, that will be reviewed, should be reviewed by you, you know, confidentially. And I think you can do that each on your own, and we can have an executive session meeting between now and the continuation of the public hearing. You can meet with your attorney anytime you want, within the attorney-client privilege, confidentiality. It's outside of the open meetings law. There's a process and procedure to follow, but it's very simple. We can do that at any time. As far as well, there's a procedure to follow, but so I would suggest, because we have not heard from Mr. Bonville, those are the technical engineering, I'll call them, aspects that need to be addressed. And I understand that our consulting attorneys have asked Mr. Bonville for some input, so they're waiting to hear from him as well. So I would suggest a month and a half at least.
Would you think that, I mean, I was thinking we have a May 8th workshop meeting with no
That's-
hearing scheduled. I think that's, we want to go as quickly as possible.
Okay.
You know, I think that
Yeah,
we
that
said
should
we could
work.
get the comments next week from the
And
attorneys
I'm
and,
gonna chase down Mr. Bonville. I'm
Yeah.
gonna keep on top of him.
May 8th.
so, all right, so what's what we'll continue to. Before we get to that, I just wanted to address a couple of the questions that were raised about what we're doing now. Basically, you know, acknowledging the accepted weaknesses in our code in terms of parts that are ambiguous, parts that are outdated. What we've done is we've used sort of the follow your nose technique to nail down where we think the odors are coming from, and that's led to our last round of testing, which was done on site at the location we believe the smells to be coming from. And when the results come back from that, we'll prove it, and that would allow us to enforce much more aggressively, because we'll then know for a fact that's the source of the odors. Normally, under this new code, hopefully we wouldn't have to do all that work. But thankfully, you know, with using the firm that was recommended by Clean Air for Orangetown and going ahead and increasing that testing, we're able to, you know, find out what that result is. Again, that those results are due within this calendar month, hopefully sooner. And then that changes the ball field a bit, because we've actually narrowed it down to the site. And we'll have different evidence in court when we get there. In terms of night enforcement and what's done now with reports, the things with the way these reports work is a lot of times they come in completely unexpectedly at odd hours. We have 1.5 code enforcers really right now. And to get to off hours, we'd have to hire staff. In my next budget, we're going to be addressing staffing in all different departments, and we'll figure out whether we have the right numbers in the building department generally, and in terms of off hours enforcement for all issues, odor or any other compliance issues. But we're not at that point yet, just based on the cycle of hiring personnel. And when a complaint comes in, if someone is available and in the area to investigate, they do. Oftentimes, the odors are fleeting, and we then put it into a document that we're able to use for mapping. And now that we had our first meeting of the Clean Air, or the Air Quality Advisory Committee, who is reviewing our historical data with our employees, including our code enforcer, engineer, and all the scientists that are members of that committee, they're developing a plan for further tracking these odors and plotting winds and projecting where odors might be at certain times of the day. They have all the old back historical data. They're getting current reports as they come in, and that just makes us better understand the currents and everything like that. And they're also reviewing the reports that have come back from TRC Solutions to give their interpretations of it. So we have a lot of different angles on this generally for the town, and I think that this last round of testing will really put a fine point on it. We're not spending any more money at the moment on testing than we have, and the recommendations that might come from the ZBA as to changes for the aloof specifically may end up being would end up being part of that process for them to be reimbursed if they have to, for them to reimburse the town if they have to, if we did authorize payment for more engineering. So that kind of summarizes where we stand right now, but I think that about covers it.
I just want to point out the resolution that I would recommend that you do adopt, your item number 15, if you're ready. And just reference the two items of correspondence that you received since the last public hearing, which is, if you'd like, I'll just read what they are. You received a March 5, 2018 letter from Douglas J. Schutz, Acting Commissioner of Planning, the Rock County Department of Planning, as per the New York State General Municipal Law, Section 239-M, et cetera. And also you received a February 2018 memo from the Orangetown Planning Board. And that last memo from the Orangetown Planning Board is just simply consenting to your notice of intention to be lead agency under the State Environmental Quality Review Act. At some point, we'll need to complete our SEQRA review. We've started it. We haven't gone into it much further than just issuing your notice of intention to declare lead agency and receiving the Part 1 of the environmental assessment form. I feel that that doesn't need to be done now. That will be done as this legislation gels a little bit more and gets more fine-tuned. And then I think at that point, digging deeper into the SEQRA review would be appropriate. I think it's premature, is what I'm saying.
Okay.
But,
Thank you.
yeah, so you're good procedurally, just adopt the motion number 15, which is a resolution for continuation of the public hearing to the May 8, 2018. May I suggest 8:15? I don't think it really matters, but I have the historic board meeting at 7:30. They generally are completed within an hour. Like tonight, it was 7 minutes. But
That meeting starts at 8.
it was
generally, so-
unusually short.
All right,
I would suggest 8:15.
sure. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion.
Councilman Valentine, second by Councilman Divney, all in favor? All right, so we are continuing to, again, that is the May 8th meeting at 8:15 will be a continuation of the public hearing. Again, if you've written comments, those are always accepted at any time as the public comment is open generally.
Since the public hearing is remaining open, it's continuous comments.
Yes.
Correspondence can come in 24/7.
Thank you very much, Dennis, and, oh, well, 24, we can't promise a response 24/7, but we'll get it 24/7. All right, moving on to our next public hearing, which is related to the planning board. We're clarifying some stuff from the original language of the law, and we're adding an alternate member, essentially. So is there a motion to open the public hearing?
I'll make a motion.
Councilman Valentine, second from Councilman Troy, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. They don't have anyone signed in on this. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this particular public hearing to add an alternate to the planning board? Generally is what the content is. No? Okay.
I'll make a motion, we close public comment.
Okay. So the motion from Valentine, second from Batari, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. And then we have the actual local law related to the planning board. Is there a motion?
Well-
Or do you have any comment, Rob? You want
I just wanted to touch base on it briefly. This was in part, as you indicate, because the board wanted to appoint perhaps an alternate to the planning board, obviously in the event that for vacations or someone's unavailable. And in looking at that, we determined it would be a good idea to clarify the planning board's role, duties, and membership, training, and attendance, et cetera. So that's all within the law. One issue, we did get a county planning letter dated April 3rd, 2018. The first requested modification, which we made in the law clarifying this section in 10.4A of New York State Town Law, and we did that. The second one, I'm going to ask if the board is inclined to override it. It reads as follows. On May 14th, 1993, the Orangetown Town Board passed a resolution requiring Planning and Zoning Board of Appeals members to attend the Rockland Municipal Planning Federation certification courses once, and then to attend the update of case law every other year. This requirement should also be added to the proposed zoning code amendments under the training and attendance section. In the training and attendance section, it already references the state town law, which has the training requirements, which the board will approve. The only reason I suggest maybe overriding it is actually myself, Mr. Mandel, I actually see Ms. Hurley also, recently attended a training session offered by Pace Law School called, it's a Land Use Leadership Alliance. So if a planning board member went to something like that, to have a requirement that they go to the Municipal Planning Federation also would seem to be a bit much. again, provided the board approves the training that I just mentioned, you wouldn't have to go to the planning courses that year. So I just.
We have training required already, it's just not the specific thing that there's.
Well, right, and frankly, that is the training that
Yeah.
9 times out of 10 people will do. This other course is just another course that, would be a good one to have. But if you put that in there, the person would actually be required to go to both, which, is really not necessary. So I had some override language if you're inclined to override it.
Okay. That's, would we do that post-voting on the law? Before
No, I
the
would do
law?
that before voting on
Okay,
the law.
so can you,
Right, well,
we don't-
I had sent it
we
around,
have-
but
we
it would
sent it
be,
around.
that
For
you,
the record.
I'd ask for a motion to override comment number 2 in the county planning letter dated April 3rd, 2018.
All right, I'll make that motion.
Councilman
We
Divny,
gotta do
second.
that on roll call?
Second by Councilman Batari?
Sure.
Okay, by roll call?
Yep.
Councilman Batari?
Yes.
Councilman Troy?
Yes.
Okay, Councilman Dibny?
Yes.
Councilman Valentine?
Yes.
And Supervisor Day?
Yes.
And the reasoning, as I indicated in my email earlier, would be what I said, that the training requirements are approved by the town board every year. The board members submit them, and the board approves it. And while it's certainly encouraged that board members would go to Rockland Municipal Planning Federation courses, other courses are available, and we don't want to preclude people from taking advantage of those either, so.
That's fair. All right, and then for the actual local law, do we have a motion? Councilman Batari moving to adopt the local law as proposed. Is there a second? Councilman Troy, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, great. Now, we're not, per discussions I've had with Rob, we're not going to be able to actually fill the slot yet because we have to get the law up to the Department of State and everything. It'll be probably the next meeting we're able to vote on an appointment. We were originally going to try to do it today, but again, these requirements for notices and everything. Okay, so moving on to our last one, is there a motion to open the public hearing for sewer facilities bonds? Councilman Troy, second from Councilman Batari. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so Jeff, if you could step up and give us a brief overview of our bonding, that some of this one's required public hearings and most of them aren't, but this one is.
Sure, there's 3 different types of bonds. One that you are effective immediately, one that requires a public hearing. The sewer requires a public hearing, and so we had to provide notice of the public hearing, and then you can vote on it. And then there's ones that require the permissive referendum. So we've already done all of them except for the public hearing for the sewer, and that's what this is for, 2.327 million. Of that, 2.2 million and 10,000, I think, and 107,000 was for equipment. The other 2.2 million was for the sewer improvements, relining, et cetera. So that's what's before the board and for the public hearing tonight. And then once the board listens to the public outcry, then they can vote on the bond.
Hopefully it's not outcry.
In the olden days, that's what it was
I think it's
called.
shouts of joy, that's what it was, because their toilets will still flush. All right, any questions for Jeff before we get into the public comment portion? Okay, thank you, Jeff. We have one person signed in, Andrew Wiley signed in for the bond issuance public hearing.
So one of the things I've been noticing is there's a pattern with regards to bonds in the town of Orangetown in which it's not clearly delineated the specific use of it. It's like very broad. So my concern is not only for this, we've seen situations where we've had bonds $40, $50 million. So 2 million, most people just like, whatever. But it's not really specific as to what these funds are being used for. And I think as a board, either you have the information, and if you don't, you should. Because I know firsthand that there's been multiple times in which monies have been bonded for and been misused for what the board didn't intend to use it for. So if you're gonna adopt this bond, please either be informed as to what specifically that money is being used for, and it should be attached in an addendum before you vote. You may not want to do that on this specific, but going forward, this is a situation in which, where is this money specifically being used? I see the whole language, I understand it, I get there's lining, he says lining and something else, but in the event that that money's not used for it, the language could be used for anything. Something this board would not be in favor of. And to give discretion to the head of the sewer department to utilize the money in a way that this board may not want, you're basically writing a blank check. So, and there's plenty of problems in that sewer department, and I'm sure I'm gonna bring them to light in the future, but this right now is an issue that really should be looked at before you actually vote on it. What specifically is this money being used for? It had to come up, you had to come up with a number. Why is there not an outline of the specific scope of work that this money's being used for? Is it because there's a concern that you don't want to handcuff them? Meaning like there may be another emergency that's more important than what this money's for and be utilized for that? It just seems like a slush fund that gives a department head a discretion in which this town board is not aware of, and then they end up doing something that you would not be in favor of. And I think that you really need to look at what you can do to hold them accountable for the specific use of these monies, so that they can prove that these monies are being used properly for the specific issues that they're intended to address. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so
See if anyone else wants to speak.
before we have any other comments on the bond issuance public hearing, before we get back to Jeff and then the board, I think will be the order we probably go in. Okay, so given that there's no further comment, do a motion to close?
Second.
From Councilman Valentine, all in favor, second, sorry, from Divney, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we've now closed the public hearing portion. Jeff, you want to go first?
I want Jeff back up.
Yeah, Jeff, if you could please step up real quick.
Jeff,
Yeah, go ahead, Dennis.
I have done, over the last 12 years, significant multi-million-dollar projects up in the county. And in terms of the expenditure of money, there are legal bounds in terms of what you can spend on and what you can't spend on. If you're even on the borderline, I had to check with legal. Now, I would say here, in terms of the boundaries here, you talked about the relining of the sewer lines, and also down in the Nyack, all right, and also another $107,000 in terms of equipment. But explain, please, so somebody who's talking about, seems like a slush fund, could be used for anything, because when stuff like that goes out over the airways, and I'll have to give this to speak, it wasn't whacking us, just whacking the sewer department and whoever else wanted to whack. It's a thing. Could you explain?
Sure.
So anybody could understand this, please?
And this is very important to understand because, the SEC, these are municipal bonds that are issued. That means they are tax-free. So the SEC oversees all of these municipal bond issues. We do provide exactly what the bonded items are to bond counsel. What bond counsel then does is actually create these resolutions, and what they do is they group the items based on their expected useful life. So when these bonds are issued, there's a term and a duration of the bonds that matches the term and the expected useful life of the vehicles or the equipment or the facilities that they are being used for. And our auditors in our annual review certainly check all of our capital projects and ensure that the money is being spent for what the money was bonded for. There is a little leeway, and I say very little leeway, in terms of there's an estimate. Let's say a truck costs $35,000. We estimate it at $35,000. Maybe it comes in at $37,000. But another vehicle we estimate at $30,000 comes in at $28,000. If they're of the same exact type of duration, then you can change a little bit within those categories because obviously it is an estimate. Now what you can't do certainly is you can't go over the amount in each of those specific categories. So if the estimates come in over, then we have to use fund balance in order to cover the difference, or we don't purchase that additional vehicle. So we can't know with 100% certainty what our expenses are going to be. We do the best we can, and the departments do the best job they can to estimate what they are going to be, but we realize that it's obviously going to be different. But we are overseen by our accountants, and we are overseen by the SEC, and it is not a slush fund. So I want to be very clear about that. And there are strict regulations, and there is oversight.
And just to add to that, the language of the actual law or the bond, the resolutions, is not the full scope of the public documents associated with what's being bonded for. I mean, we've had the specific truck, model types in publicly available documents.
Chris, that's exactly right. This resolution is 2 pages long. When we issue the bonds, they're 150 pages long, and you can see exactly what they are being used for, and that's where you get the full scope. So this is the first step of issuing the bonds. We have to meet with Moody's. They oversee our finances, oversee what we are bonding for. Bond counsel makes sure the list of items that we're bonding for is appropriate. And so there are checks and balances all throughout this. And again, this is the first step. And we have to publish a notice of estoppel after this is passed. The public has 30 days to contest it if they don't believe that it is something that should be bonded for. So there are checks and balances all throughout this process. And even after, we have continuing disclosure to the SEC every year where I have to send in our updated financials. And so this is all reviewed and it is checked. And again, it is not a slush fund in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other questions for Jeff? Okay, so
Just that, the bonding, all the bonding that we've been working on has been started sometime last September.
in September, yeah.
And it's been discussed and beaten up and lowered, and I would imagine that the sewer department is about a quarter or less of what they originally asked for. And this has been determined to be the most important things by the town board, and that's how we got to this point. It wasn't, we're fully aware, just so everybody knows, we are fully aware what's in this bond, more than I'd like to be aware about how many times we've talked about this.
All right. So I would suggest we vote on the bonds and return to public comment, that we can close out the issue we're discussing. because
We
now
got
that-
another bond to vote on after this.
Yes, I think we should probably go through.
All right, so we're gonna move on to the first bond?
We should at least move on, maybe, how many bonds do we have to vote on?
We got 2 bonds.
We should just vote on the bonds, both bonds, and then we'll go open the public comment for the meeting, get back to that, just to get this.
So you want to
subject wrapped up.
consolidate 22 and 23 together?
Or 21, and then 22, and then 23, we would vote on, in order. Not, we don't have to vote at the same time, but we'll just quickly do that, and then we'll go back to public comment. Is that okay? You'll do it individually, though. Right. Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the sewer facilities bond issuance? Councilman Troy, second. Councilman Batari, we need a roll call for that one, please.
Okay, Councilman Vittori? Yes. Yes. Councilman Dibny?
Yes.
Councilman Valentine?
Yes.
Supervisor Day?
Yes. And then a resolution to authorize the issuance of 2.3 million in serial bonds for more sewer facilities. Is there a motion? Councilman Batari, second Councilman Troy. Do we need a roll call for that? When we do, roll call, please.
Okay, Councilman Vittori? Yes. Councilman Troy? Yes. Councilman Dibny?
Yes.
Councilman Valentine?
Yes.
And Supervisor Day?
Yes. And then we're just going to close out the bonds section with this last one. Is there a motion for authorize the issuance of various bonds for $545,000 and change? This one is not subject to public hearing, only the sewer district one was.
Moved.
Councilman Dibny, second by Councilman Valentine, all in favor? Okay, great.
All right, let's go.
So I move that we open public comment.
Second.
Second by Councilman Dibny, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, just give me 1 second, I gotta change the timer here, see if I can figure it out. Ready? 1, 3. Hey, it worked, all right, great. You gotta get a new timer. It's a really complicated process. Okay, the first person, now we've gone through all of our public hearings for the day, and now we're on actual public comment, which is 3-minute time limit, any subject you want to discuss. Andrew Wiley is the first person who signed in.
Can you just give me a minute while I get my papers here?
Certainly.
Thank you. For a second. Okay. So, thank you. So before I get started, I just want to address one thing. Inside of that, number 23, the various items. Again, it wasn't specific for the specific items. Probable useful life, it should be more descriptive for the specific item, but that's besides the point. So I'm here today to talk about the property located at 495 Orangeburg Road in Pearl River, in which they continue to live in that premises without a certificate of occupancy. Work was performed by an unlicensed contractor. The town did go out and inspect it. There has been no building permit issued. Things were added to the file after we already foiled it with dates previously. We have a building permit here that was issued, or not issued, but applied for, $669 on 5/23/2017. Now again, we just had Trump Tower had a fire, no sprinklers, man died. We have a family that's using these premises. The code is very specific. They were cited on this. My concern is they were not cited with violations. Work was performed in the basement. The basement was finished. The roof was done. Dormers were added. Bathrooms were upgraded and added. All these things were done. And no permits, no certificate of occupancies, and no violations. And the town has been aware of this for well over a year. And we have a letter from actually all the way from 2014. So I put in a FOIL request with the finance department to get a copy of the check. Now, I find this absolutely hilarious that he's asking me to come up with $340 to get a copy of a check that should be readily available, trying to bill me for hours. Supposedly it takes 6 hours. Now, this gentleman's been the head of the finance department for approximately 6 years. This is not a personnel issue. This is a management issue. And this man should be looked at and investigated for the way he treats myself and others, and the fact that he withholds information from this town board and hides it in audits that you guys aren't aware of. And I will bring it to light in a timely manner at some time in the future, but he should be investigated for how he treats me and how he responds to FOIL requests and the discrimination that I have received from this town, specifically Mr. Bensick in the finance department. I will address those later, either through legal means or otherwise mentioned. So we have an inspection note that was done on 5/23/2017, in which it outlined specific requirements. They asked for the whole building on 495 Orangeburg Road to be sprinkled. They asked for compliance. They asked for all these documents. Nothing is in the file for over 6 months, almost a year. People are dying from fires, and this town has been put on notice, and no violations are issued.
Thank you. Next is Eileen Larkin signed in. I don't think I see her here, though. Okay, I guess she had to go after the 17 public hearings we had. Esta, are you still here? Okay, Esta left. Allison, did you want to comment on this this particular one? There we go. Public comment. And whenever you're ready.
Allison Sullivan, Blauvelt, New York. I'm actually glad you brought up the testing because it kind of applies to that a little bit. To say I'm discouraged at the process of stopping the odors that are being emitted from Aloof is actually an understatement. Aloof has grown under this town's watch despite a history of odor issues and other violations. This town will suffer from having a business like this, but the surrounding homes, schools, and businesses will suffer the most. It is clear Aloof will deny that they are the source of these plastic, chemical, floral, noxious odors to the end. All the testing won't prove the truth unless the town is savvy and tests while odors are occurring and while Aloof is not aware. An email from George Sweikert from the New York State DEC on September 15th, 2017 states this, and I quote, "But you have to understand that during a stack test, the company is watching their operations very closely. No burning or high temps during the tests." Canister tests that residents took while odors occurred showed 4 elevated chemicals of concern above AGC and SGC levels, and yet that information was dismantled when the DEC claimed the testing sampling results were improperly processed. I've been patient. I've done what you've asked. I've odor sampled. I've reported, showed up and spoke at meetings, foiled for over 2 years now. Actually, more. So please answer a couple questions. And actually, while we're on the subject of foiling, I'll give you credit for making that online system. That is actually fantastic. It makes things a lot easier.
Thank you.
But before, when I went into the building department and foiled a document, I was able to actually talk to some of the people there. And sometimes I even got my foil on the spot, which was fantastic. It was a time saver. Now, with this new system in place, a foil can take up to 20 business days to receive, and it also can be denied, which is lawful. But I want to know, how is this better for the residents? And then my questions to you are, how do you plan on protecting the neighborhoods surrounding this LI area from existing encroaching factories and manufacturers? How are you going to preserve and save these neighborhoods from losing value on their homes? And how are you going to ensure future businesses are not going to impact residents' property values, rights, and health? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else who's here for public comment who is not signed in? Yes, Barbara.
Hi, thank you. I'm ashamed to say that in 2003, when the comprehensive plan came out, I was working, busy with my family, and oblivious to what was in it. However, in part because of RPC development, I just finished reading it, and I was really struck by 3 things. First of all, how much of what is in the comprehensive plan of 2003 has already come into being. The sidewalks, the rail trails, the Orangeburg Road Bridge, the commercial development between Lowe's and the Palisades Parkway. How much our comprehensive plan has in common with sustainable development goals. And what I'm here to really talk about tonight is the approach of the comprehensive plan to Orangeburg itself. As a kind of sort of a real commercial area. And it spoke of the major east-west corridor of the town of being the kind of 304 to Orangeburg Road to Veterans Parkway corridor. And of improving that corridor, maybe making it continuous between 340 and Orangeburg Road, and you of course making the bridge, widening, and well, I wanted to know, is this plan to develop this as a major east-west corridor going from kind of 9W to Pearl River, and perhaps even to 304, still being considered? And given the many residences along that road, is the town board mindful of the safety of those who live on this corridor? Right now, it's hard to go at high speed between 9W and Pearl River because you got the twists and turns along 340, you got the lights to take you over to Orangeburg Road, you got, you know, the bridge construction. But if that ever becomes a continuous corridor, it's going to be a fast road. And if it's a fast road and there are a lot of houses and the senior citizens there along there, it's going to make a difference. So I just kind of wanted to, since this struck me, to kind of talk about it and say, kind of ask you guys really to be mindful of the residences along that corridor.
Thank you. Sure. Anyone else who would like to join for public comment before we move on to responses? Ms. Hurley, did you want to? Yep, okay.
Yes, thank you. Heather Hurley, Pearl River. First, I'd like to just congratulate Rob Magrino for being appointed as the town attorney. It's nice to see you up there. I also just had some issues regarding aloof again, and the public would like specific clarification tonight regarding recent air sampling at Aloof Plastics. Members of Clean Air for Orangetown were told in an email from Supervisor Day on April 4th that, quote, testing took place on Monday 3/19 and Tuesday 3/20 inside Aloof, and that, quote, the DEC was present both days. And on April 9th, that, quote, testing was most of the workday both days. Members of Clean Air for Orangetown consulted with George Swikert, Air Pollution Control Engineer for the New York State DEC Region 3, as he was invited to observe by the company TRC to observe the process. He stated in an email on April 7th that, quote, there was no sampling on the 20th. And in another email from George Swikert on April 7th, he states that the DEC was present from, quote, 9 o'clock on Monday for the sampling, and that they were there until late that day. The only odor report on Monday 3/19 was logged at 6:52 a.m., and none when the DEC claims that they were there after 9 a.m. There were at least 4 reports of odors around the Aloof vicinity during 4 different times throughout the day on March 20th, which the DEC claims there was no sampling. I'm requesting immediate clarification on this issue tonight. The public has been strung along for way too long now, and another discrepancy such as this only leads to further loss of confidence in this board and in this process. And just for the record, I would like to report an odor report tonight at 7:12 p.m. I was traveling here and I was on Mountain View Avenue right in front of Town Plaza, and it was Mountain View Avenue and Route 303, and it also continued to Bataan Road, and the wind was reported at north-northwest. Thank you.
I would just suggest you bring that to the appropriate channels. Thank you. Okay, is there anyone else who is here for public comment? Okay, so I move we close public comment. Is there a second?
Second.
So Valentine, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I'm gonna do a quick run, then Dennis wanted to hit one, and then I'll take it around, and I think I'll call Jane up to talk about the specific testing, because I'll get that first, okay? We'll go with Heather and Allison. All right, first of all, Heather, to your concerns, your specific questions that you asked, I don't think the whole public asked it, I think you did. I responded to the several emails that were sent in extreme detail to Allison, to the general Clean Air for Orangetown address, sharing when they were going on site, what was going on. The DEC was present. I'm not present physically at the testing. I'm relaying as much information as possible because you guys are an active, the Clean Air for Orangetown group is an active, interested party in this and has worked very closely with us. I just would ask that it be done in good faith, because when I'm doing my best to get you as much information as possible and to be subsequently hit with 10 more and 10 more and to be basically called to task for trying to give you when they were on site and doing testing and answer the questions and then be told I didn't give quite enough specifics and maybe the DEC was there at this hour and not the other hour, and I'm trying to, you know, just help you out and not just saying, hey, foil it. It's not really our problem to get to you. Maybe a little back and forth perspective, that would be nice, because it's not really fair to me or the board when we're trying to make that work and I'm trying to communicate in as best a way as possible to have it thrown back at me for taking the time to respond and give the information. And I'll have Jane come up at some point beforehand to address that. So the testing while operating, it's impossible. And George is right in the sense that, of course, any company that's concerned about polluting, if they know someone's coming in, is going to make sure they're operating extra well that day. You know, just like how when you see a cop on the road, you're going to tap your brakes. There's no way to test on site without someone knowing you're there. We don't have, you know, folks in ninja costumes going down to the stacks. You know, they're going to know we're there. But we can do testing, again, with the company that was recommended by Clean Air for Orangetown in the best practices possible. To the FOIL question, I appreciate the compliments on the form. There was no change in policy to FOILs, except that I just made them, actually an internal memo, making it smoother and faster. But what you're citing is just the legal rules. If someone comes in, I will admit there was a brief period for about 3 or 4 days where where there was confusion as to when the public hearing is open on the ZBA, whether you need to file a FOIL request. That happened for about a 24-hour period. We corrected it right away because you don't need to file a FOIL for that, and that's been fixed. But beyond that, you know, the laws of the state of New York for FOILs have not been changed. 20 days only applies if it takes that long to find the record. And then the retesting. So there was a second round of testing based on the canister issue that showed elevated levels. We just got those back. We're having our air quality advisory board review it and give feedback before we get the final. We got a draft report back. We want to get their review first before we finalize it. The report seems actually positive, but I'm not the expert. That's why we have this new process set up, so I'm not, we're not being scientists out of turn. And then we're going to be able to release that and go over it in a public forum and find out exactly the ambient air testing situation. The canisters from the first round of testing, there was that second round of testing for ambient air quality?
No.
No.
TRC did their own testing.
TRC did their own separate testing to address the concerns of the resident canisters that show the acrolein issue. They did a whole separate round of testing to back that up and see if it was an outlier or not. And we have the clean air, keep conflating clean air with, we have the Air Quality Advisory Board giving their feedback to TRC right now and hammering out the final result there, and that's going to be reviewed. And that is, again, a separate round of testing from the on-site testing that was done on the 19th. It was a whole separate.
That was part of the original.
Part of the original scope of work.
Scope of work and the testing. We had a first round of testing. We had a second round of testing after the improvements were made at the Aloof factory. The first round of testing had an acrolein bias because you have to heat the canisters to a certain temperature so you don't have an acrolein bias. When we originally did the testing in the first round, acrolein wasn't initially selected to be something that we were going to test for, but then midstream we decided we would test for acrolein, but assuming canisters weren't heated to the necessary temperature, the second round of testing, they did heat the canisters to avoid the acrolein bias we had in the first round of testing.
And that's why the professionals do it that time, to make sure it was more accurate. So when we get that final version, we'll be able to go over it publicly, and we've got a better process now because we've got our internal scientists looking at it. I'm going to ask Jane to come up now so we can close out this particular set of questions that are related to Aloof, and then we'll move back to the other public comment questions. Go ahead, Jane. About the testing on the on-site, could you give us the timeline and everything that happened those 2 days?
Again, I wasn't there for the entire setup of testing. It was scheduled to begin on the 19th, and they had the 19th and the 20th in their schedule. My understanding is they were able to collect all the samples that they were required to do on the 19th, so they didn't have to go back out on the 20th. I was there on the 19th for a meeting which I've addressed the board before about, and I did notice the smell, and I documented that, and it's in my report to the ZBA. I was there, and someone from the DEC was there, and we all met and talked about the processes in the plant. So when they're saying there was no smell, there was. I saw it first, smelt it firsthand.
Was it, Jane, was it inside the factory or outside the factory or both?
Both.
On
And
the
then
property
the
or off the
following
property?
night, well, it was on the property, and then Tuesday, the 20th, I was standing outside after the town board meeting, and I recognized the smell again. That was about 9:45, and again, that was entered into the ZBA presentation that I gave just 2 weeks ago. So that covers the testing. We're still waiting for them to compile all of their results and get back to us with a report. I know Mrs. Sullivan submitted a FOIL. At this point, we do not know when we will receive that report. So she will be getting a 20-day letter because I don't have a choice, because I have no control over that. So, we're doing what we can, and once we receive it, obviously it will be presented to the board and then the public.
Right.
As far as the FOIL requests, I need everybody to understand that just between Friday and Monday, we processed 48 FOILs. That's an immense amount. We have 2 clerks that process FOILs. They also have to process about 26. Monday we had 26 permit applications come in. We're an extremely busy department. We're doing some reorganization, which I know that I've spoken to the board about that on the previous meeting, and hopefully it'll, produce more efficient things within the department. With the FOIL requests, they were not necessarily being processed properly before. They're supposed to be reviewed and signed off by the department head before they are released to the public. If the department head wasn't there previously, the clerks would, if they had time, they'd pull out it and right away give the information to the requester. That's actually not proper, so we're trying to get a system down Sometimes they're gonna be done quicker than others, but again, if we receive 20 foils in one day, the clerks can't be expected to just stop what they're doing and process 20 foils, because then that's gonna affect our permit applications and issuing permits and C of Os. In reference to Mr. Wiley's comment about information was added, he requested the property folder. We provided it. At the same time, I did not know that one of the code enforcement officers had 2 letters on his desk. In the time that he requested his copies and the clerk was making them, I found those 2 letters. So I included them. He had not seen them when he observed the file earlier that day or the day before. I don't remember the exact timeline. But we found the information and we provided it, as well as to his brother, the same copies.
I just want to jump in there, but since you got to Mr. Wiley, and Mr. Wiley, you and I have had communications about this subject, and as we left it, I said to you, the people who moved in are saying they found the house with dormers and a finished basement done when they moved in, and since have been complying by adding a sprinkler system to make legal other people's work. You replied and said, no, that's new, since they've moved in. Now, they moved in recently. We're talking in the last, few years they moved in. Some people moved in 20 years ago here. I said, if you have any evidence to show that these dormers didn't exist after the date in which these new residents moved in, please send them to me. You have not sent that. This was the day you came and you were cursing at my assistant. You did, and you admitted it to me. And I'm not going to sit here and have you accuse us of hiding things when I actually have been talking to you directly on the subject. I've been listening to you. The permit fees were done. The building permit is for the sprinkler system to make legal work that was done by a prior owner that was illegal. If you bought a house and you come in and you find a violation, it's not your fault it's there. It's your responsibility, however, to fix it, and these residents are doing that. Now, again, I'll reiterate, if you have any evidence that these dormers were not built before these folks moved into this house, please share it, because I've asked you for it and you didn't send it. And you sent me photos that were unclear, and I said specifically, which house is that in the photo? I can't tell, and you never replied to that email. So I don't forget these communications. I'm not discussing it, though. I'm just telling you that next time if you want to send information and make accusations about the building department, about residents next door to you, provide evidence behind your claims. Don't say you'll submit it at a later date when it's more exciting. I'm talking to you as town supervisor, emailing you. Send me the information. If it's true, we're going to deal with it. If for some reason those dormers didn't exist, we're going to fix it. But the facts as we have them is they moved into a house that was illegally converted with dormers in a basement, and they are now legally adding sprinklers to make it to code. That's a fair thing. And if you have proof otherwise, like I said 3 weeks ago, send it to me. Don't come to the public comment and say that that's the facts when you haven't provided the information that you claim to have.
Right. The current owners are not denying that they have to comply. They did tell us that when they obtained the house, these items had already been done. So the way we address it from the building department standpoint is, well, okay, you inherited or you bought the problem. So now we have to fix it and make it legal. They're moving forward to do that. Their application came in, it was incomplete. That happens. It happens a lot, especially for people who have never done this before. The building inspector went back to them and said, you need the following items. A lot of times it falls by the wayside. People have lives, things happen. We did follow up, and there have been letters issued to them to keep nudging them along. There have been communication, the inspector calls, what's going on. They hired an engineer, a sprinkler engineer, to do the drawings, and they're also gonna provide drawings for the basement. Once they come in, we will review them for compliance. If we need additional information, they will be told we need additional information. The inspector has been out there twice and is aware of what's going on. That's all we can do. We have to work with people to remedy the situation. Just if we start issuing summons and stuff, that's not going to help them at this point. They're working towards compliance. Issuing them a summons and dragging them into court is only going to hurt them financially. We don't want that. We want them to cooperate and finish and make it legal, and they're moving towards that. They made a permit application, and it's being processed.
Well, doesn't the permit application stay that enforcement proceeding anyway?
Yes.
You would, if you put in an application and your permit is issued.
Andrew, please. No, if you keep speaking, I'm going to have you removed from the room.
The permit has not been issued because it wasn't complete. They're moving towards completing the permit application.
All right. I know.
But yes, it would be a stay. So if we issued them a summons or brought them into court, they would say, well, we're trying to comply. They're hiring people, the inspector's been in conversations with them, so we're moving towards compliance.
I know we've discussed this, because I called you up about 2 weeks ago. You know, Orangeburg, that's how I get to work. I was driving up Orangeburg. There was the fire inspector and there was a code enforcement officer there, and we discussed this, and Jane said, you know, he's trying to put in a sprinkler system to bring it into compliance. I called Mr. Wiley to let him know what was going on, and I told him we're trying to get them to be compliant. We're trying to, you know, and I deal with this all the time. And Rob Magrino deals with it all this time. Decks, finished basements, bathrooms, they're done all the time. Conversions of kitchens, conversions of garages. When you go to sell your house, you did the work, or maybe you bought the house, and when you bought it, there was no violation, but now there is a violation. It happens all the time. And we want them to comply. We want them to do the work. We want to make sure that it's not a safety issue, and that's what we do in the town of Orangetown. We want people who have violations of town code or town rules and regulations to comply. And you know, I've been on the phone with Jane. I know Chris has been on the phone with Jane. We're trying to get this house to comply. They've had engineers and architects and all that go in to make sure they are in compliance, and that's where we are with that.
And the only thing I'd like to add is, we keep talking about illegal contractors. There's no one more against illegal contractors than I am, because they take food out of my mouth. But you have to call, or someone has to call when they're on the job site. You can't call years later, because there's no way for someone to go back and figure out who did what and when and how it was done. So I hear you. If they're illegal and they don't have licenses and insurance and they're not bonded in the county of Rockland, which is an easy thing to find out, you can call Consumer Protection. They'd be more than happy to give you the information on any contractor. Those calls have to be made immediately, because then the building inspector will go out immediately, or the electrical examiner from the county will go out immediately, or Terry Grosselfinger from thing will go out immediately. To say 2 years later that they use illegal contractors is really hard to do anything about.
And to add to that, if you do use an illegal contractor, more likely than not, you didn't get a permit and you didn't get a CO. And when you go to sell, the problem is you got to be compliant not when you did the work, but you got to be compliant with the code at the time you go for the CO. So if you don't meet the code for ingress and egress for windows, or you don't meet the code for electrical or sprinklers, it ends up costing you more money than that. So I agree with Paul. You know, anyone that's watching, if you're going to do the work, do it right. Get the CO, get the permit, use licensed contractors. Saves you more money.
Thank you, Jane. Appreciate it.
Try to feel.
And then one last thing, Mr. Wiley, you were talking about the specificity of the last bond. Again, as was said by Jeff, not everything is in the resolution. It's just a resolution that sums up everything. All the other public documents, which are made public and are available throughout the process, specify what equipment's being purchased. It's not just the first two we were talking about. It's all of the bonds that are issued, have all the background documentation. If you would like to review all 100 to 200 pages of everything that's issued, it's all publicly available. It's not different because it's a different number on the agenda. Last one was Barbara, and I think Dennis said a couple things about the Orangeburg corridor thing for Barbara, which she brought up, and that was the last of the comments.
The Orangeburg corridor has been looked at, you know, through the years. And again, before my time on the town board, it could be early 90s, could be late 80s, they talked about going directly from 303 over to 304. And that would go right through Gilbert Avenue and cut in through somewhere over on 304 with a direct road. Again, I don't remember it, you know, that wasn't on the board, but there was a firestorm on that. It was never going to happen. Now, in terms of the comprehensive plan, that was also discussed where go from 340 direct right into Orangeburg Road at Veterans. All right, that's not happening. If you look at the fact that the county put the money into the new bridge right on Veterans, or Orangeburg Road, if you want to call it that, all right, it's going to stay like that. you're not going to have a direct route from 9W over to 304. One of the things there, again, if you're late coming to a town board meeting, the lights are a pain in the neck. But the good news about the lights, and Jimmy Dean can tell you this, is by having those lights, they're not synced correctly from my perspective as a driver.
Absolutely not.
But if you want to talk about slowing people down, you know, having the Blaisdell light and the
6 of them.
and the Blue Hill light, and as you work your way on up the line, it keeps people from doing 60 miles an hour, 70 miles an hour. So the lights are an effective traffic enforcement vehicle. And the same thing if you think about going on Route 340. Route 340, people have talked about knocking that down to, I don't know, we talked about this years ago, 20 miles an hour, whatever. The state doesn't allow you to do that. But people want people to go slower on those main straightaways rather than faster. So I know you were reading about it in the comprehensive plan, but it's not happening. I was involved in the county comprehensive plan, and that came up for discussion again, the 304 or 9W over to 304. And as an Orangetown representative, I put a stop to that even being in the county comprehensive plan, so.
There's no way. Absolutely not. Are we cutting through like that? No. And I'm an Orangeburg resident. Orangeburg is going to be taken care of just like everyone else, and yeah, that's not on the table. All right. Anyone else have any responses or comments related to all the comment before we move on to the rest of the agenda items?
No.
Jeff, did you have something?
One thing.
I'm sorry, Tom.
Just to respond to a comment, I think Chris has done a great job of trying to respond to questions and concerns of residents. I know I tried to do it. I was on vacation. I got an email from a resident. I texted her. I'll say I'll look into it. And then Chris responded. We're not trying to lead you astray. We're not trying to give you misinformation. We're trying to respond to your questions in a timely manner. And we're trying to keep the lines of communication open. And I agree with Chris. If you want us to keep lines of communication, Chris tried to relay the information as timely as possible, and members of the community want to use his openness against him. I think that's wrong, and it's disheartening. And I think Chris has done a great job of trying to keep the lines of communication open, and he's been working hard and with the rest of the town board regarding Aloof. And it's frustrating for all of us in this town, but we're trying to do it. We spent a lot of money, done a lot of testing. We're trying to work with the DEC. We're trying to work with the groups in town. We're trying to work with our departments. We've created an industrial board. We're bringing experts in here. We've hired Sandra Bonville. We've hired Jane Slavin, who's been great. We have, speaking with Joe Moran, we have 4 qualified applicants for the public health engineer that we're going to be interviewing. We finally got them in now that we reposted the job. So we're trying to keep lines of communication open. If you want that to continue, you got to work with us and not attack the supervisor for trying to get you information in a timely manner.
Thank you, Tom. All right. Jeff, you had something to add, I assume, related to the bonds and such?
Yeah, one, I don't particularly like being threatened with being sued, Mr. Wiley, and I don't appreciate the dispersions on my character. You asked in a FOIL request for a lot of information from the building department about not one check, but any and all checks related to a certain property. We get those in batches from the building department. We would have to look through, and we'd have to look through by the individual person's name. This would be a manual process. I spoke with our town attorneys on this, and what I said to you in the letter I sent you today was that we are happy to provide this for you. It would take approximately 6 hours. If it's less than 6 hours, we won't charge you for that. If it's more than 6 hours, then that's your benefit. And we are taking the first 2 hours we pay for ourselves. So you would be charged for 4 hours from the lowest cost person who is capable of doing that work. So we gave you the option before we do the work. And the reason the state allows us to do this is because if you're taking 6 hours of my employee's time, then I have to make up the work that that employee does somehow, some way. And that means overtime. That means taxpayer dollars. So, you know, there is a reason for this. If you want to narrow the scope of your FOIL, I am more than happy to do what I can. But it takes whatever time it takes, and I can't change that. You have the option. If you want to pay the $340 it'll cost, we'll do that. And if it takes us more time, that's to your benefit. If it's less time, you won't be charged for that. But we are not denying your FOIL request, but you need to recognize that your request takes a significant amount of time.
Thank you. And I'll also add, Jeff was appointed originally by my predecessor. I kept him on because he knows what he's doing. He's a West Point graduate. He's won multiple awards in finance. I've yet to encounter a situation where he hasn't been honest with me. And I know finance. I worked at venture capital. I'm not like new to the game. I know how to read a financial statement. So there's time it takes to do things. It doesn't mean that someone's trying to hose you or lie to you because they're relaying the facts of the situation. And Jeff is a good man who's proven himself to his country and his town and to this town, and I don't really appreciate that at all, frankly. Moving on to the town attorney section, item number 24. This is for the DME certificate of sewer registration. Everyone there?
Yep.
Okay. Do I have a motion on this item to approve certificates of sewer registration for TAL? From Councilman Divney, second. Councilman Troy, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. 25 is tax certiorari settlement, which results in a $0 total refund by the town. It's going to affect $1,700 in the school district.
What's the school district?
This is into Panzo, South Orangetown. Okay.
Mr. Joe T, can you add on 25, school district of South Orange?
Yeah, it's a South Orangetown School District of 1753.
It's like 6 lines down.
Okay. Councilman Troy moves. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilman Divney, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next, we have, we're going to, again, we workshop this. We've put in a promotion and to an existing position for Rich Oliver, who's going to be our deputy inspector, Jane's deputy, who will be our front person to process all applications. So everyone gets the same person looking at it at the beginning to review and smooth everything out. Is there a motion to appoint?
I'll make a motion.
Councilman Valentine, second. Councilman Batari, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Highway, authorize attendance at the Cornell Local Roads Program for 4 employees. Is there a motion? Councilman Divney, second. Councilman Troy, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Highways, this is to approve for the craft fair Central Avenue field usage. We're going to lend assistance for trash barrels and such. Is there a motion? Councilman Troy, second. Councilman Divney, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, and then resolution to appoint Brian Edwards, grounds worker, under Parks and Recreation. Is there a motion? Councilman Troy, second. Councilman Divney, all in favor?
Aye.
Moving to DME, resolution to appoint Matthew Kane, maintenance mechanic, electrician. Again, I think this was the one he was doing the job, and we're just putting him in the job now. Is there a motion? Councilman Troy, Councilman Divney, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Appoint Matthew Lenahan, retitling to a slightly different position, no change in salary, all in favor, I'm sorry, motion.
Moved.
Divney, second. Valentine, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we have some new business that we're going to request, that we're not workshops, but we request that we, if everyone's okay with it, voting on to speed up, because these folks were, again, we talked about this, held up for quite some time. We put it specifically to this meeting, so it was the amount of time necessary to notice it, so we can have the hearings on this. Doesn't mean that we supported it, just means that we're going to have the hearing. For the request for zone change for Hickory Hill. Does anyone have any questions or comments about this? Yes, Councilman Troy. And I think their representatives here too.
So all the all the properties on Hickory Hill Road?
No, so this would be the two, Rob, it was the two parcels?
It's well,
Or is it the one?
it's really just the one, which
Just
would,
the
I
one
guess,
parcel.
affect the two, and we can get to it. But for now, it's just the property located at 70 Hickory Hill.
It should be all the properties on Hickory Hill Road. The reason for that is because the residents of Hickory Hill have some type of co-op, I don't know what, in terms of their community center, in terms of their pool. And I'm in favor of this. I'm just telling you that all the people should be notified there, because there were some people who are not in favor of this.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, they'll be
they're
notified.
definitely being notified. This is, the first is basically a motion to, for the board to declare itself, its intention to be lead agency, circulate it pursuant to SECRA.
I apologize.
No,
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't, maybe it was my fault for not
pursue
clear.
it, circulate it, and then it will be on for the public hearing. And, no, the town code requires that not everyone, but within 500 feet, the property has to be posted. Mr.
Then
Joyce is aware of it.
notifications will happen.
Right, so
And
this.
was the tax
Because
map
I had
issue.
asked that before, and it wasn't clear. This is going back to one of our workshops. It was not clear.
Yeah,
No.
it wasn't clear at the time. We were considering doing the whole neighborhood, but we realized that the process would be much longer for this and.
When you say, you mean changing the zone for the whole neighborhood?
Change the zone for the
Right,
whole
in
neighborhood.
terms of
was considered
notification.
map issue, but we're just doing the one parcel.
It's the one,
In this.
for the
we're
one parcel.
Considering the one parcel, I
but
should say.
it'll be, this is the precursor to get us started onto the public hearing.
Okay. So you want to, you said you were going to move that? Okay. And is there a second?
I'll second
Okay, all in favor? All right. Is that everyone's aye? Good, all right. And then Town Plaza 2, this is the same thing for circulating for a public hearing for SECRA. This is the one where the line goes through the Town Plaza and they can't put a restaurant on like a corner of their development. Okay, so is there a motion for this one? Councilman Valentine, second. Councilman Batari, all in favor? All right. And then we have the motion for 34, am I correct here? 34? Yep. For Galway Bay, for the set a public hearing for May 15th.
There's two dates in there, 15th or 24th.
Oh,
If we're, since we don't have the circulation language, I would suggest the 24th, because we can do it next week and then the following week.
okay. So we'll set that for, if you could just change that to May 24th to set the public hearing for Galway Bay. We had the presentation the other day. Is there a motion? Councilman Batari, second. Councilman Troy, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. And we have permission to attend the Emergency Preparedness Conference by Officer Johnson. Councilman Divney, second. Councilman Batari, all in favor? And then move to accept the resignation/retirement of Officer Fitzgerald. Is there a motion? Councilman Divney, second. Councilman Batari, all in favor? Next, we have, this is an important one, actually. We're going to be extending we just renewed the Cold War Veterans Exemption kind of just in time a few weeks back for this year, and we want to extend it indefinitely now, so we don't have to run into that situation again. It's like every 10 years right now, and we don't want to surprise another board. So I'm going to move that. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilman Valentine, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on to the audit.
Okay, tonight's audit consists of 3 warrants for a total of $1.8 million. The first warrant had 48 vouchers for $1.019 million and was for utilities. The second warrant had 9 vouchers for $53,000 and was mainly for the Blauvelt Fire Protection District Workers' Compensation Insurance. The third warrant had 358 vouchers for $729,000. Items of interest, number 1, Atlantic Salt, $43,000 for highway salt. Number 5, CSEA Employee Benefit Fund, $30,000 for dental benefits. Number 9, Foley, $107,000 for snow removal equipment and highway. Number 10, Global Montello, $21,000 for fuel. Number 11, Goosetown, $25,000 for the police equipment lease. Number 12, Helmke, $27,000 for OHA snow removal. Number 21, the comptroller, $67,000 for justice fines. And number 22, Van Bortle Ford, $25,000 for a police vehicle. Any questions on the audit?
Motion from Councilman Divney, second from Councilman Troy. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so I think there was a lot of folks that passed away, and we've had a large gap. So I think we need to go into executive session afterwards for personnel. So we're gonna the motion will in the end be to adjourn, or to move to executive session and immediately adjourn at the conclusion. But I'm just going to give the opportunity for the board members to go through, if I kind of, just do call-outs for the folks that they know within this list here. First, Jerry Donnellan is not a resident of Orangetown, but he's had a huge impact on the veterans community in Orangetown and in the county. An incredible guy. I was a friend of his. He really helped me out when I got back from the military. He passed away. No one has affected the veterans community more in Orangetown and Rockland than Jerry Donnellan, and he's a real loss for our community. I'll also reference, real quick, Gordon Taylor. I got to know in the last couple years. A really nice guy, ran the Pearl River A Club, but got very ill recently and passed away, sadly. And anyone knows Alan Riff, the former deputy supervisor, his brother suddenly passed literally a day ago. We're all very sorry for that. I'm just going to ask if anyone has specific commentary about other folks on this list and want to call it out. Yeah. And so the adjournments are in memory of Jerry Donnellan, of Beverly Hackett of Blauvelt, Jane Johnson, the mother of town employee Matt Johnson, Bob Knight, who you probably remember him walking around in here taking photos. He was the Orangetown city editor for Rockland County Times and also the county historian. He passed. Maria McKay, the former town of Orangetown historian, Helen Murphy of Orangeburg, Jeremiah Murphy of Blauvelt, Sue Riley of West Nyack, as I say, Kevin Riff, brother of Alan, Gordon Taylor of Pearl River, and Louise Wachowski of Blauvelt and on the Friends of the Orangetown Museum Committee. So, again, if I can have a motion to move to executive session and immediately thereafter adjourn, in memory of the said names. So moved by Councilman Divney, all in favor, second by Batari, all in favor.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry,
Executive session, what department is the personnel matter on?